There it is.
Welcome to an exclusive Fully Exposed podcast bonus episode. If you don't already know, here at Fully Exposed, we push the envelope of human performance. And I am jazzed to be connecting with Madelain Burgoyne. Did I say that right? Today from across the pond in Cape Town. She is an optimal human performance behavioral specialist. And I briefly worked with her a year or so ago. Was it, Madelain?
Yeah, about a year ago. Indeed.
And you've recently had this big download, haven't you? ACTT, is that what you call it? Archetypal conversational trance therapy?
Yes. Yes, it is. Wow, I'm impressed. You've been on my wall.
Yeah. So what were you doing when that download came through for you? And when did it fully land in your body to pull and bring through for people?
Great question. What was I doing? I was relaxing, taking a lot of the year off. I was, just in the background of my mind, it's always doing this. It wants to optimize efficiency. So, and it naturally finds ways to compare what worked, what didn't work, especially in myself or clients, and the feedback and where most of the resistance lies and why it works for some and why it doesn't for others. And then, I've been studying so many different modalities over a decade that they kind of just fit as though a puzzle piece is being put together. And so, when you understand the mind and how it works, or you learn how it works, you begin to see it in normal daily interactions, and then you can, in a casual conversation with somebody, see the difference between their conditioned self, the part of them that is not the self, the protection layer versus the essence of a person. And I learned to speak to those parts simultaneously. And so there's a conversation going on in the background if you know how to listen, and there's an obvious conscious conversation going on with the protective layer in front. And so my love for archetypes, because the unconscious mind really is about stories and metaphors and images and symbology. It speaks to you through those things. And over practice, and obviously, with coaching my clients, and, you were part of that experience, you just begin to see these things through practice. It becomes like an unconscious competence thing. And then you know what to ask, you know how to hunt effectively, you can find the conflicts, the unconscious knots. You can see if there's a layer upon a layer, and it's just marvelous work. So you can tell that I really love this. I think about it all the time. Even in my sleep, my mind is speaking to me. It's like very lucid. It's the conscious concepts come up. If I have a question, I will look at it, look at the dynamics of it, and then it gives me the answers, and then I wake up and I have to write it down. So that's what I've been doing most of this year. Your second part of the question was, remind me.
It was really.
It was, what was I doing when I did this?
And when did it fully land in your body? Like, when were you like, the bulb went off?
Maybe about a month and a half, maybe 2 months ago. it landed in my body, and you can just, I felt the relaxation. But there were hints of it before as well. Um, there were just missing pieces here and there, and then it just simplified, trimmed the fat, and there we have it.
Yeah.
Archetypal conversational trance therapy. And then I scribbled it down in like 10 minutes, the outline of it. So what does it feel like for it to land in your body? Action, movement. There's no static between getting in the way of pouring it out, I guess, is a good way of describing it. It lands. It really lands. And you hold it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the opposite. Oh, go ahead.
I don't know if you've experienced this or not, but what's coming up for me right now is kind of like you say, once it lands, it's interesting because 6.5, 7 years ago, when Fully Exposed with 2 X's dropped in and landed in my body, like I knew, like it locked in. Mm-hmm. And it's been fascinating because I've seen my not self and then, the different layers, cut it off and come in and come off. But it's always been there. And I think that's how I can stay so true to it for so long, because it's literally why I'm here. But it's just fascinating because it's never left me, but I have kept myself in my mind, and personal development can become a distraction, keeping us in our heads instead of actually playing it out. And I juggled with that forever, it seems like.
It's we live in a world where we are bombarded with projecting messages, trying to get you to buy into the story of there's something else that's better, which is why it's called self-improvement, if you think about it. And it's $1 billion industry. So why would it not be rigged to, speak to the parts of oneself that is yearning for your true self, but is just so insipid and it's insipid. There's simple and effective, and then there's insipid. It's shallow, it's hollow, it doesn't actually resolve anything, which is why one still feels hungry and needs to go on off to the next thing. Maybe this will work, maybe that will work. Everybody's looking for their 15 minutes of fame. Even in all these coaches who, have to have these beautiful branding shoots and shit, it's just ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And I've been there, but I've never been one who could go all the way into like one of those branding shoots you see in those paid ads on Facebook with the coach dressed in a brightly yellow dress standing in front of the Eiffel Tower, who's had her makeup professionally done and hair this. She does not look like that every day. But she needs to put this pose and this posture. It's all posturing. It's selling the fantasy and the illusion of happiness, but when it comes down to it, they give you fucking workbook of how to fake it till you make it, kind of stupid stuff that has nothing to do with the depth and the depth psychology of deep stuff. It doesn't touch the unconscious mind at all. It just compounds on top of the facades that one is already wearing. In fact, it adds those layers on even more so that you know how to dress up for the day in shape-shifting forms to elude yourself.
I
and
love that
others.
you said shapeshift because that just popped up in my mind and then you said it. And as someone who also plays in the arena of aesthetics, and I originally, when I first started, I became health coach certified and I did the exact same thing on what you speak of. And I think it's all part of the journey. It's that opposite same flip side of the coin, you know? I did the branding photo shoot. I did all that stuff. But I think the difference comes into play is when you're actually integrated, but when
you synthesize,
you can still play in it, but there's a difference between perpetuating the gap and the hierarchy that just keeps the shape shifting, just switching different roles. It never gets anywhere. Like it never truly brings you back home.
Absolutely. And so, lucky I have this, I guess, agreement with myself to, if I see the truth and it just busted a fantasy I was living in and wanted so desperately to be true, then I'm going after it. And I don't care who I have to disappoint in no longer enrolling in their fantasy. I mean, I was born into a cult religion, for God's sake. And I broke myself out of that.
That's fascinating. How would you say that's one of the most difficult times in your human experience so far?
It was the best for when I really needed it as a child. But the long-term effects of that kind of entrained conditioning starts wearing you down and out. And when you have major initiatory moments like leaving your parents or in my case, losing my mother and my father to situational circumstances where I had to be fostered in a home, moving amongst other people, and then moving into marriage where I had never had such deep interpersonal relationships with another human being before. And then becoming a mother, nothing that they said it was real. And so the fantasy bubble of a very naive 21 like 3-year-old, 6-year-old, 12-year-old, 14-year-old, 16-year-old, 19-year-old, 21-year-old, 24-year-old, 26-year-old, 30-year-old, because those were all major initiations for me. None of it lived up to it. And so, when I was about 24, I had my major identity death where I left my religion after my son was born. And I knew nothing. Everything that I thought was true was no longer there all of a sudden. It was like ripping off wax in your nether regions. Brazilian wax. So.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, so it was excruciatingly painful, but then when I centered myself in those moments and had myself, because I had pre-practiced that many times over in small ways, I always knew that I could never really lose my essence or myself. And there was a darker aspect to it as well that would now later in these last perhaps since 2019 to perhaps even now had to go deeper. And this is when the archetypal conversational trance therapy came through.
That's a key part right there. A lot of people, in my experience in observing other people and interacting with other clients, and then as well as my own lived experience.
Yeah.
That's when innovation happens. It's when you're at your perceived lowest, and it drops, it lands, and it redirects you. And there's something about the ages between like 28 and 30, and then around 58 and 60. They are like these pivotal events that come out to really show you your calcified energy patterns. That
I would, it depends. I would say 28. For me, it was 26, 24 and 26. 30, I got divorced.
That's a pivotal moment too.
It is. It's a major identity crisis there too. You know, it's their patterns, relationship patterns are patterns from before. And I had a lot of mom guilt at the same time. You know, my son was young. And that has devastating effects on him. And I know that because of my own parents. And then, 24, turning 25, when my 4-year relationship after my divorce ended as well. And I had hit rock bottom again. And this time it was different because I could see clearer, and I was studying alchemy again, and I had done it before when I left my ex-husband. And when was that? He gave me a book in 2014 that had influenced me more than anything I had studied before. And the reason why is because the unconscious mind speaks in mythological symbols and stories, archetypal things. So it was so weird. And this is evidence of an unconscious moment. It is when you read something and you feel it move you, but consciously you haven't caught up about what it really means yet. If that makes sense. That's a paradigm shift moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it got me going. I started a yoga practice. I divorced. I also launched my health coaching practice at the time as well. So I also did the health coaching thing for a little bit. And moved and whatever, launched my first coaching business, which flopped miserably. And in 2019, I had ended everything again. Fell apart.
Yeah.
So
what was the name of this book?
Oh, it's Clarissa Pinkola Estes' book called Women Who Run with the Wolves.
Okay. I've never read it. I've heard it around the coaching space. I've heard about that book. I've never read it though.
She took 20 years to write that book. And I can understand why, because it is so dense. There is so much in every single sentence you read. Every sentence. Now, retrospect, looking back in what I know now, I can also see where she got some things wrong. But overall, it was the thing that got me into archetypal shadow work and analysis and stuff like that. So yeah, it's now part of what I do.
It's beautiful. I love this work, and I feel a real connection with you. Like, there's a lot of coaches out there, and with me, I'm very foundational energy for people. And so naturally when I entered, I'm very observational. So I'm just watching how people have built and constructed these things, and just watching the industry over the past 7 years.
Yeah.
Very fascinating. There's only, a very select few that can really just, tell you the truth and get straight to the shit, and I think it's so important. But then again, we value truth. And so those that don't value it, they're not going to register with it. But I truly believe we are some of the next leaders that are really going to interrupt this self-development industry, because it's no longer necessarily about the development, but truly coming home. I mean, that's the whole thing. We're all doing it in our own unique messaging as messengers and specific gifts.
I'm just thinking for a second. Absolutely. It's a breakdown of a structure that hasn't been working for us collectively.
Yes.
So what would be the reasons to actually give up that persona?
The illusions shatter.
Yeah, but like, nonetheless, why don't you just build another one?
It's interesting because I recently spoke in this in my last podcast about fulfillment. Like, I mean, they get so stuck in the achievement illusion, but I mean, we're conditioned for achievement,
Totally. Perform.
But like the fulfillment is just creating, like just allowing this art and what I'm here to create and bring through my brand. And I guess that's another reason on how, I mean, most
say that last part again. Just say that last part again.
I honestly don't know what I just said. Like, it just comes through sometimes, and I'm like, yeah, I have no idea what I just said.
Yeah.
But so many people are trying to fulfill themselves and fill voids externally with the achievement and the old, perpetuation that is it more than a multi-billion-dollar industry? I'm not even sure what the self-help industry even is, but it's astronomical.
It is.
But I think people are getting tired of it. They're tired of the same fucking loops that they're in. And
yeah, totally. That's good. But if that's been your default for most of your life, and it's your default modus operandi for self-defense, because connection is the very thing that is used against you to entrain you to giving that up for self-betrayal, and that's where the split. And then they get mistaken in thinking that, if the outside changed me inwardly, then the outside should also be the thing that shifts me back.
Right.
But the looking to the outside and the continued, in air quotes, failure is actually a clue to understanding that that is just a symptom of the pain in which we've already turned our face away from, which is why it is unconscious. It is the way that we have survived. It's to have an identity death, the one that you have falsely attached yourself to, is because if we had to look inwardly, you'd find the originating thing that terrified you in the first place, and you haven't looked there since you were a child or wherever that major thing happened. And though traumatic events themselves aren't traumatic, it is what we made them mean about us and our relationship to it that actually is the terrifying thing.
Absolutely.
The terror. And that part has been encapsulated, the time capsule. And this is what regression is. The unconscious mind holds the key, but because we misinterpreted when we were so young, if we had to look at it now, we would see something different, because there are other aspects of ourselves that are no longer children. That doesn't need to rely on that way of outsourcing validation constantly, where yours is actually hidden in a box in the deep recesses of your unconscious mind.
Right.
Narcissistic personality disorder is one of those very difficult ones that to break through that. Very, very difficult.
Yeah, it's
or sociopathic, and then
fascinating
cluster B
too.
personality disorders as well.
It's fascinating too how people throw those things around so easily nowadays. The narcissist
Yeah,
and the
they don't know.
sociopath.
They don't know what it means.
It's just an instant projection.
It is, but it's also mistaken with other ones that have is a flip version of it, which would be borderline and personality disorder. They look the same, flipped.
Mm.
They're more needy. Both are needy, essentially.
Right.
The one seems avoidant, and the other one seems submissive. One is dominant, the other one is submissive. So you get the sadomasochism happening.
Right.
And it's all encompassing, all consuming, super addictive, and it's why it's so easy. That's like what marketing is these days. It's the equivalent of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's just different ways that people create for themselves to siphon energy.
Totally. Yeah. And then the grandiosity that comes along with it. It's one thing to be artistically authentic, and then there's another thing to be grandiose. It's like an entitled child.
Right.
Yeah.
That brings up my entitlement that I battled with.
Oh, do you remember when was it? Just before you enrolled, we had that conversation in the group.
Yeah.
It was one of my favorite moments.
Because the thing is my field has always brought me stellar opportunities, but that also fed that entitlement, because I would just put it off and be like, oh, there'll be another one. Like, it's no big deal. Like, another great opportunity to show up, but at some point you have to look at yourself and be like, fuck, I need to like leverage these and take advantage of these, right? Like,
yeah, because even though you were saying that to yourself, what was really happening?
Just kept putting it off and ignoring myself, avoiding,
and what was your practical
responsibility? Say what?
What was your practical life like because of that?
It was just full of distraction. I was just busy.
Yeah.
There's no, and see, that's my thing though, like, and my brand, I'm here to literally reconnect. Like, reconnect is what we do. And it's what I'm here to do myself and bring it out, not only in myself first and foremost, but then in others. Yes. And just being is the thing. And there's a difference when you are moved from passion and being in your process versus outward projected action that you're taking. There's a difference between that action and being moved.
It's an introjected projection.
So
it means we take the outside in and produce a projection.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, so it's not very difficult for me to see this kind of structure everywhere.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's like, you just did a live the other day with Jennifer, and I'm always like, the people that I love to just go on and just support you anyway. But like, I also get things from it as well.
Absolutely.
And I was driving and just kind of listening to you guys in the background, and it brought up back to this hierarchy thing and how it can be a mind fuck for people and how it's not working anymore for a lot of people. But it's like, in May, I had met with these two girls when I moved to this new city. And for the first time, it was like, it dropped into my body and I completely understood the difference between relationships and partnerships. And I could see her paint me with her trying to relate to me. And that's where I truly...
Totally. Now you're touching on projected fantasy. She wanted to role cast you in her fantasy.
Yes. And that's when it truly landed. And I could see the pedestals and how that hierarchy shapeshifts within people and externally. And that's when I completely took myself and shattered the pedestal within myself.
That's brilliant. That's really brilliant. And then what happened after you did that? What did you experience?
it was a whole other level of this peace and relaxed element
Did you feel any
in
grieving?
there now since I moved through my life.
That's cool. I'm curious to ask you, did you feel any grieving?
Yes. And I'm glad you said that, because I think that's a missed part, since there are so many different versions of us out there at one time. Like, you have to embrace the version of you that you're releasing. But a lot of people don't want to do that. And that's how they stay stuck. And you have to grieve who you were before. It's like the death of somebody. Like, you have to allow yourself to grieve through everything that life teaches you to detach from.
You have to grieve that, and then you have to grieve the person that you could have been had you not wasted your time.
Right.
Ending. And the fallout effect of how pretending affects other people. It's full on self-ownership. And then the understanding of the originating wound comes into view.
Right.
It synthesizes. But, that won't make sense to many people unless they've touched that. So.
Right.
Yeah. It's quite interesting. In my longer containers with people, I can teach them these things as it naturally just comes up. In my shorter one-to-one coaching sessions with people, they don't need to know all these things. What used to take me 6 months with a client, I can do in one session, maybe 2. And if it's really hard and if it's really interesting, bad, or like severe case, up to 6. And then some people just want to keep it on retainer because they appreciate a kind of like a handful of board of directors, people they know they can trust because they tell them the truth.
Right.
In a way that is in alignment with their true self in terms of reaching their potential and their what's important for them to bring into this world, not because they need the praise or the criticism. The reason why they can have an honest BOD is because they thrive on the border of growth and challenge. So they don't feel anything about criticism or praise. It's not about that. That's irrelevant.
Yes.
Completely irrelevant.
You nailed it. And I love how you said that, board of directors. It's so true. I mean, as a child growing up, always being able to see through things and people, I was hungry, so hungry for somebody who could actually tell me the truth.
Yeah.
Nobody ever could.
Yeah, I guess as a child, we wait for people to tell us the truth so that we have the permission to do so ourselves, because we know how dangerous it is to speak up as an obnoxious child in a world where you're surrounded by adults who are deeply socially conditioned.
Right. And that's where the hierarchy comes in with the parenting.
Yeah.
And it just shows up in every area of life. I mean, they're all interconnected, right? But I love that. And it's not... And I honestly think when I would hire coaches and when the personal development became more of an addiction and keeping me in my mind instead of acting on things, again, I would shapeshift. I would lower myself and put them on a pedestal instead of having myself on a pedestal. And it would keep me in a never-ending spiral.
The hook is real.
Yeah.
So starved, so fucking starved. I'm not sure if you're allowed to swear in your podcast, but
that's explicit. I can have a very filthy mouth sometimes, so
yeah. Interesting. Yeah, no, I could talk about this forever.
I could too. It's literally, it's there when I wake up. It's there when I go to sleep.
Really?
Same.
Yeah, and it's not all consuming like it used to be in the form of desperation,
Right. It's just in the background. Like, it's just natural.
Yeah, it's like I was describing before. It's a purpose you love waking up to. It doesn't. It's not connected to your sense of self-worth or whatever. It exists because you already know it.
Yep. It's intrinsically, cellularly known.
Yeah. It's whole, or becoming whole, and more so, and building upon that even more as you go, and as you lean into your experiences, you no longer anticipate anything about it. It's just moment within the next moment within the next moment. In the transitions between doing and being, they become less anxious ridden. You know what I mean? It becomes a trust. Yeah, it's the best way I can explain it.
Yeah.
And you will get tested, obviously. I mean, leaning into it's such a weird concept, because I could have been stuck forever in the loop of, I need to be better in order to be able to do better.
Right.
Being better where I was, despite how things looked, wasn't something I had to fake. It was just something I knew I could do. And that is what shifted the room around me, space and time around me.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's this misconception, especially in the personal development world, where you, again, have to have these shoots and shit that isn't indicative in any way of your real practical life. Can you get somebody to trust you without all that flashiness?
Right.
And that can only be felt when you interact with someone, when you see them really be that, beyond the facade, the thing that they're really asking you to look at is them, despite the protective layer. There's that essence that they put in front of you. They come to you for a reason. Their unconscious mind wants to know the essence beyond all the firewalls, wants to know whether they can trust you. So it's going to test you. And I've had some really high level, what do they call them in America? A-list kind of clients.
Yeah.
And they have firewalls, man. Hectic ones. And because people pedestalize other people, they will crumble in seconds.
Yeah.
And want to fall down at their feet and worship them. Which is why they became celebrities, because they felt that they fed off that. Well, in most cases, you get many artists who do it for the love of the art of it, but many of them needed to feed their sense of self by becoming that successful.
Right, and I believe we're going to see a big shift in that coming up, and it's as always, like it's the energy behind what you're doing, because as somebody who loves aesthetics and art.
Yes, me too, by the way.
It's the both and. Like, yes, the shoots, creating the art. Like, I love having photo shoots, like I've had before, but see, the energy behind them is what matters, and how you're doing that. And I think as long as the messaging is honest.
You can tell by the way a person smiles and their eyes, because your body gives away the unconscious moments you're trying to protect or hide behind. It reveals itself. So whenever I look at a picture, I've been sketching people, like portraits of people, since I was 5, 6.
Really?
Mm.
That's interesting. Awesome.
I had to watch. I lived in a very dangerous environment. I had to be able to read people very quickly.
Right.
So you can tell. And it gets worse the bigger the more of an audience you have.
Right.
Yeah. Or the more successful you want to be and appear to be so that you can grow that audience. So, yeah. So like the true litmus test for me is sincerity. You cannot fake it.
Yeah.
No matter how much we want things to appear differently, we still yearn for that the truth that can be felt in a moment of true presence and sincerity.
Sure. Definitely.
Yeah. So yeah, paint, art. I just have a client who's a burlesque dancer, completely performative, and she was working she was in a mentorship in a burlesque dance school, and it was completely corrupt and exploitive. Posing is one thing,
right,
behind the scenes being another thing. And what kept her there for so long was that she really cared about her work, and I relate to her with this. And she didn't want to leave the people that she was interacting with because she was truly there to actually help and play in the true art of the true form of what she was doing. But the the business that kind of like held that umbrella and space for them to participate in was really corrupt. And the way that she approached me was she was having body issues, back pain, all sorts of things, hectic anxiety. And when she came to me, she was speaking in the language she was trained in there, the entrainment, the conditioning.
Yeah.
But the unconscious mind used her own conditioning to speak its message. Very easy to miss. It did two things. It told me how she's been programmed and what she's really trying to say behind her programming. And when it dropped for me, everything got real, like super real in an instant. It's a moment of a realization of what you're really dealing with. And this isn't something that some Facebook fucking ad sponsored coach dressed in a yellow thing posing in front of an Eiffel Tower with her one leg up and her handbag swinging in the other hand can do.
What about balloons? You gotta have balloons in the other hand.
Balloons or whatever the fuck, man.
No, I just had to throw that in there.
Or Gucci glasses.
Oh.
Influences.
And I don't, like, there's nothing wrong with that. Like I said, it's the energy behind it that matters at the end of the day. It's not, quote, right or wrong, but luxury grounds me. I'm one of those people that definitely loves the finer things in life.
Strip it away, who are you?
Say what?
Strip your luxury away, who are you?
Oh, at the end of the day, I'm nothing. I'm everything and nothing.
Yeah, and would you still show?
I guess that's where performance comes in, and the stage and the proposition and positioning, and it can be fun because again, you're a character in the stage of life. But at the same time, it's just the energy behind what you're doing and what you're creating and the art that you're displaying, I guess, so to speak.
Art is disruptive. It tells the truth.
Right. And what's fascinating about art and masterpieces is that certain people can look at them and not see anything. It doesn't activate them. It doesn't do anything for them. But then certain people, it strikes them. And a beautiful piece will just pierce it just right,
Yeah, and you can tell a commoditized piece of art versus something that is exquisite. It could be so much simpler than the other thing. It's exquisite because it stops you in your tracks, because unconsciously it's just touched something that you wouldn't ordinarily look at. So it doesn't matter if you have a photo shoot or not, really,
Yeah.
If you love it, you love it, but your true art will have that message in it. It an aspect of it, you could play with a commercialized form of it, and then there will be an element in there that just totally contradicts it,
Paradox.
blows it up. So that's a person who knows. And those who are looking for it, even though it's unconscious, will notice. They will hear it, they will see it, they will feel it, they will be like, they'll read it, they'll read something that they don't understand, like I did when I opened Esther Pincola's Woman Who Run with the Wolves book.
Mm.
I had no fucking idea what was happening to me.
Right. I thought I was fucking going crazy. When I had my awakening, it was a death and rebirth.
Yeah. And it's so sad that we are like so unfamiliar with that territory. So unfamiliar that we actually are, like I said before, so afraid to look at ourselves, to look at those parts that need protecting. And yes, in severe trauma cases, those parts really needed to be protected. Otherwise, you just KO, man.
Right.
There are people who are born into, circumstances where it's nonstop, aggressiveness. And the part of the way that they survive is to go off into an inner world that is more real to them than the outside world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I could talk about this shit forever, man. So
yeah. But when last thing I want to say is whenever we want to enroll other people into our fantasy, we're super dissociated from reality.
Right.
It's the beginning cult.
That makes me think of culture. It's got cult right in it.
There we go. What are we collectively programmed by? Our culture. Hopefully it's a good one that's balanced and synthesized and doesn't turn away from not looking at things that can be present, that can, hold a person's development in reverence, and teach it how to deal with difficult things. Because a child needs a mother to self-regulate, to be able to discern the difference before it forms its own healthy ego to be able to do that.
Right.
And like I said before, there are parts of us that have been developmentally stunted and like encapsulated and pushed down far in that unconscious recess where we're looking at other people around us and we're wondering what the fuck is wrong with us. It's not a form of feeling individuated in a good way.
Right. Yeah, wholeheartedly. And I can relate to that. And I think the biggest thing, and I mean, that's the shift into adolescence, but reparenting yourself in the ways that you needed that they didn't know how to do. And it's never about pointing a finger. When you finally come into understanding the game and how it's played, and that you're defined by what you allowed to define you, like you create the meanings, and it's truly just that's the whole point of the game, is coming back home. And everybody's path is unique and individual, but once you understand how to navigate your own process and how to have fun and switch perspectives.
Some people actually need the facilitation. They need
right.
One of the things that I'm not happy with mainstream media and self-help stuff perpetuates is that I can do this myself.
Right.
Myself. Yes, to a point. You can get yourself to a point. And if it's really like, even though I did that for myself, I still needed that further support for the spaces that I was not seeing myself, because it's unconscious. It's under your level of sight.
Absolutely. And that's where it comes back to your board of directors.
Totally.
I value that.
And it's your therapists.
Yeah. But that's a completely different,
Yeah.
like, what am I trying to say? How am I trying to say this?
It's a different dynamic.
It totally is. And I don't have anybody in my real tangible life that I can have that with. Like, and I know I have higher standards than most people because I'm operating differently than majority of people in the world.
That could
like
also be
all of my connections, like with you, most of my connections are all internationally, believe it or not.
Yeah, true. I have very few international connections that I revere, and we speak regularly. They are my true BODs.
Mm-hmm.
I do have one or two people in life in my surroundings, and the rest of them I have, with people that come in and out of my life every day. I have moments of true connection with them, and then it passes, and that's okay. A moment in time shared. With sitting with somebody this morning at a cup of coffee because I wanted some sunshine and breakfast. I'm never going to see that person again, but there are moments of just pure connection that also are just more incredible than having a long-term friendship with somebody that you can't do that with, not even in one instance. So,
right.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Quality versus quantity are not the same thing.
Quality all day long. Quality.
Yeah. So I'm so happy to hear about what you're doing, and seeing what you're doing is really cool. The momentum is on.
Yeah. So I've been working on my Divas methodology, and that came through shortly after my brand 6.5 to 7 years ago now. And
Divas.
I've been refining it over the past 7 years, and it's going to be in the opening membership that I have coming out.
That's cool.
And it's fascinating because the opening came to me 3 years ago. I think it was 3 or 4 years ago. And I just left it on my notes because, once you channel and get bits and pieces, it's like a puzzle, and eventually it will come together. And so, yeah, I just sat there, and then it clicked, like, I'd say 4 or 5 months ago, and it's time to create it and to get it out in the world. So, yeah, it's just, you can't rush innovation. It will come in its own timing.
Yeah. And I know that I'm also going to refine this one, but when the majority of it is pulled through, it's time to go.
Right. Right. But it's nurturing, and allowing the space for the originality to keep that tone,
to keep its essence.
Yes.
Yeah. Very cool.
Beautiful. I've loved this conversation, by the way. I could chat with you forever, but where is the best place listeners can find you online right now?
Yesterday, I just made a YouTube channel. I'll give you the links as well. So YouTube and Facebook is great. Instagram. I should be better at doing social media, but I post regularly on Facebook. Probably because it's just the first place where I can open a blank page immediately and scribble something down.
Sure.
And share it on a wall on my gallery, I guess. And not that I love Facebook, I really don't. But awesome. If there's ever going to be any content on there that's worthwhile reading, I'm not gonna add to the noise. So
yeah,
it's going to be worthwhile reading.
Love it. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. I've loved this time. I always love when I connect with you.
Oh, cool. Yeah. It's a long while, and I'm so grateful to speak to you. Thank you for having me.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I will have Madelain's links below where you can connect with her right now online, and we'll catch you on the next episode.